One of the key aspects there that we kind of align with is taking a long-term view of how you grow your business. And I think that nicely fits in with kind of the Bitcoin ethos of low time preference, right? And it is, how do I build this business to be sustainable and add value to clients in the long term? We know there's a bunch of things that you can do in the short term to make more money, but is that really in the interest of your clients? And I think that aligns nicely with, hey, I'm holding Bitcoin. I know it's going to be volatile. But I think long term, it is better for humanity. It's a better asset. I want to hold some portion of my wealth in it.
Bitcoin is a currency on the internet.
If you don't trust any other currency, this is where you go.
It's going to outperform everything. Bitcoin could eventually be worthless.
Every day is a good day to buy Bitcoin.
Bitcoin reached its highest price to date.
Bitcoin hitting a new high. It really has reached escape velocity.
There is no second best.
Who cares about Bitcoin?
It's the only secure database that's ever been invented.
Antisocial.
Bitcoin is the real deal.
Stupid.
Everything is bullish for Bitcoin.
Immoral.
It's going up forever, Laura.
Fix the money, fix the world.
WhiteWork is a registered investment advisor, and the opinions expressed on the show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of Pacioli LLC. Joining us as a CPA, and the opinions expressed on the show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of Trusted CPA or other affiliated firms. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and unless otherwise stated are not guaranteed. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as a recommendation appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation. Past performance is not indicative of future performance. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice.
What's up, everyone? Thank you for tuning in. Welcome back to Bitcoin for Financial Services Media, the podcast where sound money meets professional services. We explore how to build the financial services industry within the principles, ethos, and values of Bitcoin. Today, we're honored to be joined by Joe Wood, founder of Satoshi Pacioli. Let's get started.
All righty. Welcome back, y'all. We are back with our second episode of the Bitcoin for Financial Services podcast. This is the first episode, though, where we've got a guest, and we have a special guest today, Joe Wood from Satoshi Pacioli. Joe is the owner and founder of Satoshi Pacioli Accounting Services, and I know Joe well now, but Joe and I actually just met earlier, like very beginning of this year at Bitcoin Park in Nashville. So we've gotten to know each other well very quickly. And so I'm excited to have him on the show. And we've got Wyatt as well, who's going to be, I think Wyatt's just here to get free tax advice, if I'm not mistaken. So
That's 100% correct.
So Joe, thanks for taking the time. I know you're a busy man. We're going into the end of the year and there's lots of work to be done on the tax side. We'll get into all that, but how's your Monday or Tuesday? How's it going?
It's Monday.
Okay.
No, it's Tuesday. No, we're just a day behind. It's going well. Clearly, I'm on top of things.
Yeah. Well, I guess tell us about, because you were like the premier Bitcoin accounting firm, right? And that's why we're having you on, of course, because accounting is one of the main components in this whole, in the whole business cycle, but of course in account or with the Bitcoin ecosystem. And so I wanted to just, we've got to ask you, like, how, were you 2011? Were you class of 2015? How did you get into Bitcoin? Roughly what year?
Yeah, so it's always kind of hard to say exactly when you got in. I would say, like, I bought my first Bitcoin in like 2014, and always was interested in from a like philosophical standpoint of like, hey, this would be really cool if this works, right? And so it didn't take me very much to like, I heard about it. It was like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. But it wasn't where I was like, oh, I'm going to like dive deep into this, learn all the technical stuff. It was always kind of one of those things that was kind of on the side of like, hey, there's this weird Bitcoin thing. It aligned with like what I think should work in theory, but who knows what's actually going to happen, right? And so it was very much more so like a passive following for, a number of years. Watch the price go up, watch the price go down, which is always fun. And then, learning a little bit about it over the time. But like, I held Bitcoin in 2017 when there was like, the fork wars and everything. But don't really remember. It didn't have a strong opinion on it or anything. So to kind of give you a perspective of kind of how deeply into it I was. And then really, 2020 came around, started listening to a bunch of podcasts, took it more seriously. Eventually, all your net worth is in Bitcoin. So it's kind of like the normal cycle, I guess. But it took me kind of a while to kind of get deeply into it.
Well, and then, so remind me too, because you, obviously you're CPA, but you weren't in tax prior really to getting into Bitcoin, right? You were more, I guess, were you on the audit side of things prior?
Yeah, so I started on my career in audit. I did like 4 years in audit and public accounting. And then most of my career, though, I spent in accounting departments for private companies, nonprofits. So my accounting background really very much is on the financial reporting side, the general ledger, making payments, receiving invoices in. And I always kind of tried to avoid the tax stuff because it's not the most fun thing to do. But it was very much one of those things where, I started up the company. I was really focused on, serving that controller role for small companies that weren't ready to hire a full-time person, and continually were asked like, hey, like, do you do taxes? Do you do taxes? And I was trying to stay away from it. But like what I came to realize was like, no one else actually has these answers. Like they need somebody who understands Bitcoin. And I knew enough about taxes to like fill that role for them. Right. And we've evolved a lot since then, brought on more expertise. But it really was like the Bitcoin piece was a missing piece for the people that needed the tax support. So being able to fill that role for them in an immediate sense.
Well, no, Joe, I appreciate that. That's fascinating insight. And I think you're just like the perfect first guest to have on this podcast, because we're really trying to help, the normies and the folks working in traditional, professional services, like adopt Bitcoin. So I think Satoshi Pacioli is the premier Bitcoin accounting firm. Give us some insight on how you started the firm, how you thought there was, how you evaluated the market and thought there was an opportunity to take here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it was all that strategic. It was my last job was as a controller at a nonprofit in DC. I got to the point where I was like, I don't want to do this. I want to do something in Bitcoin. And so that was really it came from the fact that I wanted to work in Bitcoin. I wanted to work with Bitcoiners. And so after thinking about all the different things I could potentially do, I was like, oh, you have 15 years of accounting experience. Maybe you should lean on that a little bit. And so that was really what it kind of came out of there. And then trying to just bring what that traditional finance background, the accounting knowledge, like knowing that, whether it's a Bitcoin company or anything else, like you still need that information, right? And so just being able to apply that to the Bitcoin world where it's not overly complicated, right? Like after you start learning about it, like accounting for Bitcoin is not the most complicated thing in the world. But when you tell somebody who's been doing it for 15, 20, 30 years, hey, learn about this new thing, they're probably going to be like, no, I don't want to, right? And so that was probably the biggest difference for me starting the firm versus your CPAs that could have done it, but just had no real incentive or, no real desire to.
Well, and so far I've only heard you talk about one cryptocurrency. I've heard you talk about Bitcoin, and I run into not a lot, but some CPAs that are more crypto CPAs. So I assume maybe you had a bit of a shitcoin phase. I think maybe telling some of that story, if that exists, if you want to share, might be helpful to some other advisors who are kind of starting to dip their toe into the water. But then also, if once you answer that, like if you could also kind of touch on why did you go Bitcoin only with your firm, and from the outside looking in, someone might be like, well, aren't you kind of hampering your growth because you could be servicing this like broad industry, but you took this like route of going extremely niche, and of course it's worked out very well for you. So maybe you could touch on that for the audience as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I certainly had the shitcoin phase where it was, hey, but it was as I was learning about Bitcoin, right? And it was like, hey, I'm going to learn about this thing. And then you had Bitcoin for a little while, and then it was like, oh, there's this Ethereum thing. And I don't really understand it at all, but it's going up. Maybe I should buy some, right? And so it really, for me, it was once I started to understand Bitcoin better, I at least realized I didn't understand any of the other crypto at all, right? And so I was like, all right, I got to this point with Bitcoin. Maybe I should just focus on that. And so I remember when I sold all the Ethereum I had, it was, hey, I'm gonna like understand this one thing well, and I'm not gonna own things I don't understand, whether it's from a technology or an asset standpoint, right? And so like for me, that was kind of the path. And so I try not to be too judgmental of people that are like, hey, I'm gonna have all these different tokens. I think there is probably a natural path there. But for me, like if you understand Bitcoin, you understand why everything else doesn't really matter in the long term. And so that's kind of the way I view it. And then just purely from the business side of things, I think for me at least, like I don't think you can really fully understand all the different crypto. I always kind of find it weird of like if Solana or Ethereum or XRP, like I assume they all work very differently. I know they're all on blockchains, but if you actually want to understand the technology, like you probably have to go all down a bunch of different rabbit holes. And so it's like Bitcoin is complicated enough that maybe you should focus on that one thing and know that well. If you're trying to understand 10, 20, 30 different cryptos, if you just want to do like the tax cost basis reporting, that's probably fine. But if you actually want to advise people and be an expert in it and gain a really good understanding of it, you probably have to focus on one. And what you don't see is, oh, I'm an Ethereum accountant or I'm a XRP accountant. Because like, obviously that's not where you're going to like grow a business on it. Right. So you just put everything in the crypto bucket and you're like, oh, I know more about this than everybody else. Right. Which is maybe not the greatest place to start with.
Yeah, that's such a good point. The first XRP accountant I see, I'm going to quit. I'm just going to exit stage left. Done. Yeah, I think you're totally right. You know, one of my favorite sayings in Bitcoin is Bitcoin works like how your grandma thinks money actually works. And it's like, yes, it is complicated. There's a lot of nuance to it. But if you focus on it, it's like, it's actually, somewhat simple to grok. It's really not as complex. I think we can actually do ourselves a disservice by making it into like this super complex system. It just takes homework like anything else. But in that journey, Joe, were you ever pressured by any mentors or friends, whatever it may be, to really kind of embrace cryptocurrency at large, or were you just like from the beginning, I'm Bitcoin only, I'm planting my flag?
Yeah, I think probably most people just thought it was a terrible idea in general of just focusing on accounting firm on just Bitcoin, even if it was Bitcoin in crypto. So yeah, no one specifically was like, oh, you should do all crypto. But I mean, there is a line there where it's like, hey, where do you actually draw the line, right? And it's not like, hey, if you hold any other assets, we're not going to do your tax return. Or if it's like, hey, you sold some assets this year to convert into Bitcoin. Oh, we're not going to do your tax return, right? It is more so hey, here's where our interest and here's where our expertise lies. And whether we're a good fit for you or not is more on the client side. But if you want an expert in all these different areas, we're probably not the right fit for it.
Your wealth deserves intention. Paciolic Financial is a Bitcoin-focused wealth management firm built to help our clients find balance between money and meaning. We integrate sound money strategies across 4 distinct personalized services: financial planning, individual wealth management, retirement services for SMBs, and Bitcoin financial services. Your prosperity, your purpose, intentionally guided at Paciolic Financial. Visit our website at paciolic.io to schedule a free consultation. Totally. Well, and that's what I think is kind of unique about, services businesses. I think it's really more the venture backed, businesses, whether that's, whatever type of exchange or product that really get a lot of pressure, from, VCs to, adopt other cryptocurrencies. And clearly I'm morally opposed to that. So I do think it's interesting, segment of, financial services, generally not venture, backable or scalable businesses, where you really do have a lot more flexibility to just embrace what you believe in, and you can really kind of lead the noise out. So I appreciate the insight on that.
Well, Joe, could you also tell us a little bit about the Satoshi Pacioli token offering? You guys are launching a token later this year,
Yeah,
right?
that's I think the big announcement for this podcast. Yeah, we don't have a price yet, but yeah, only 21 million
for now, and then we'll see. No, I'm just kidding. One thing that came to mind as you guys were just talking was, so the Bitcoin industry has had to do a lot of growing up, really even in the last 5 years, right? And I'd just be curious, you've had this, keen insight to see Bitcoin businesses from all the way from startup to, more established businesses that are just owned by Bitcoiners. And so they either have it on their, balance sheet, or they just distribute the profits out and they buy the Bitcoin personally. But I would just be curious, like, you've played this crucial role actually of helping a lot of, and all founders are bootstrapped, kind of like scrappy guys or gals, but you've helped people who have come into wealth that they probably didn't expect to come into. I'd just be curious, like, how you see the role you've played in helping the asset class actually grow up a bit and come into more of the mainstream.
Yeah. I mean, we have a wide variety of clients there. And so it's everybody from, hey, I've been in Bitcoin for 10 plus years and I need someone who understands it to, help me with my tax accounting, whatever it is, to the, hey, I just got in last year and, maybe older clients, and they have, significantly more wealth that they built up. And so they're putting a significant amount of money in, but they're relatively new to Bitcoin. And so our role has really kind of evolved there from hey, I used to always tell people, like, I know a lot less about Bitcoin than my clients do, right? Because they are building businesses in the space, building infrastructure, wallets, whatever it is. They're the experts. I'm trying to learn from them. And then now we have more and more, as you have the ETFs and just more Wall Street getting in. It is more new people that are getting exposed to as an asset. And so they are coming to us more so as like a guide, advisory. And so that role has kind of evolved over these 4 years here. And yeah, not something I probably anticipated. I really was getting into it of, hey, I'm going to bring my accounting expertise to the Bitcoin space, and then being in the Bitcoin space and learning about it, going to bit devs more regularly, like understanding it more, able to be a more valuable advisor to the people that have come in the last couple of years, which has been interesting to see.
Yeah. Well, that all makes sense. I mean, it's definitely, it is interesting when you're talking to someone who's like on the development side, right? Like something that comes to mind for me, and we can actually maybe pivot a little bit into some of the just nuances, especially on the accounting side, since I know that's kind of where you mostly live at this point in the firm. Talk us through, of course, there's the whole cost basis, there's Bitcoin treated as property, but maybe specifically, like, how are you thinking about different data sources that are harder to track? Like, I'm thinking specifically about Lightning and how difficult it really is to track these micro payments. Do we have, I guess, and I know you guys have done a lot of work with, with spreadsheets, but I guess just talk us through, for an advisor who's not fully, ingrained in how all this works. What does it look like from when you started the firm to dealing with all of that stuff to where Lightning sits now within the business?
Yeah. I mean, that certainly has changed quite a bit as well. Bitcoin in some ways is very transparent. You have a blockchain, if you want to go through and read the blockchain, you can see all the detail there. And even if you have very little insight into what it's for, right? Like, it's all in there and transparent. You can get back to it. Lightning's kind of the exact opposite of that, right? Where even like the service provider that you're working with, like the exports that you get, The information there is just, it's harder to track. And if you're not doing it in real time, going back and getting it is still very difficult. So there's a wide variety of like, ways you can do that. Some are more built out than others. Depending on, like if you're using a voltage or something like that, you have a little bit more support versus if you're running your own node at home and you have to track all that yourself, right? And so there's a wide variety there, and there's different Lightning setups, right? So all that to say, like, it is one of those things that we tell people to start of like, if you can set up your accounting side of it, if you can track your transactions really before you start and you have that set up, you're going to be in a much better place. If we have to go back a year, even 6 months and get all the transactions, it's all there. It's all possible to get to, but it's a lot harder to do it after the fact than if you're proactive and maybe you set up something like Bitment where you have it plugged in from day one. I know you guys are working on getting the Lightning side set up, but like tools like that are critical so that we don't have to have these conversations with our client when they're, when you're having the conversation on, hey, you should accept Bitcoin for payment. It was like, oh, how do I do that? And like, there are custodial ways to do it, right? But if you want them to like handle it themselves, like getting the tools good enough so that you come to the end of the year and it's not a bit of a black hole is a huge, huge gap to get through.
Go ahead, Jordan. You shill Bitment.
I'm just learning about Bitment, so I'll have to look into that tool. But thanks for shouting that out, Joe.
Well, it's such an interesting point, Joe, because as you were describing that, I was like, oh shit. Looks like my bookkeeper is going to have to go back and do some work because I didn't set up the proper infrastructure. So would you kind of have any kind of, generalized advice, for folks that are, interested in, accepting Bitcoin, paying vendors in Bitcoin? Like what are some easy things to do off the jump to make sure we don't have kind of this, rat's nest we have to untangle?
Yeah. I mean, personally, like for our firm, we accept Bitcoin and we run everything through Zaprite. So Zaprite's essentially an invoicing, well, more than an invoicing platform now, but we use it for invoicing. So we send out payment invoice requests to our clients, and it has an option on there to pay in Bitcoin, Lightning, credit card, ACH. And so for us, that's really nice in that we have the record of how much Bitcoin we received at the time. And so that we can always go back to that as our source of truth, right? So, regardless of where it's going, whether it's going into a self-custodial wallet, into a River or Strike account, into a Lightning node, like in Zaprite, it all looks the same and I can all get to those records. So tools like that are really valuable. Square now has it built into their point of sale. I haven't seen their reporting on it. I'm assuming that it's really good. Hopefully it's really good. And most of those people are going to convert to dollars right away as well, right? So like from that standpoint, the Bitcoin tracking becomes less important. But I think it really will become like, it has to be built into the product up front versus having to go back and do the accounting later. I think that's kind of the key and critical things as we try to build this out. If we actually want people to use Bitcoin as payment, as a payment mechanism, you have to build the accounting kind of seamlessly into it.
Totally. Well, I want you to double click on that a little bit more because, from my seat, I think it's my job as an advisor is getting, more robust and in some ways easier because there's other entrepreneurs in the space that are developing, Bitcoin-based financial products that I can then help my clients with. So since you started at Pacioli, kind of walk us through on what is like the tool development been that you've been able to kind of tap into. How's that making your job easier, etc.?
Yeah, there's been a lot out there. I think I mentioned Zaprite as far as the invoicing. That makes that side really easy. one of the things that we use, I don't even know that it's advisable for all clients, but we use like the strike bill pay as well for businesses. So for us, we keep our treasury in Bitcoin. And so as people are paying us, we're rolling it into Bitcoin, or they're paying us in Bitcoin. And so our balance sheet essentially looks like Bitcoin. And then when we're paying payroll, it comes out and the payroll processor hits the strike account, right? And Bitcoin comes out of it, right? And so that is a custodial solution, right? So it's not perfect as far as like, hey, you're trusting the custodian, but from just an ease of process, if you want to live on Bitcoin, if you want Bitcoin to be your base currency, you can do that now with the bill pay, right? It does not make your accounting easier. Every time you do that, you have a gain or loss, which again goes into, you have to build that in on the back end of like, hey, you're buying it here. We know how much you paid for it. Every time you have a transaction, we're recording that gain or loss. If that's built into the exchanges, the headache on the consumer side is so much easier to take care of. I know River's done really well with that for a while, where they'll have PDF statements on a monthly basis that tell you, here's how much Bitcoin you have, here's the realized gain, here's the unrealized gain. And then like, from my standpoint, we check that, but it's really nice to have something you can just go to and actually have that already, at least as a starting point when you're doing that calculation. So yeah, I mean, we use Strike. I think River has great statements, great proof of reserves there now as well, especially after 2021 with all the FTX stuff. Having a business hold Bitcoin, it's one of those things where you really want to be, if they're going to do custodially, you want to have some support that they actually hold in the Bitcoin that they say they are. So, I mean, there's probably a million more things that I'm not thinking about right now, but just where the industry is today versus 4 years ago. I think just light years ahead, and the tools are light years ahead. Lightning is light years ahead, right? So not perfect by any means, still probably a long ways to go there. A lot on the privacy side where we probably have a lot of work to do. But yeah, like, unfortunately, like a lot of the companies that we've gotten to work with kind of have led the charge there. But if you're getting into Bitcoin today, and the tools and resources that are out there are just drastically different than they were 4 years ago, but definitely 5, 6, 7 years ago.
If you're a financial professional working with Bitcoin, you know the pain of messy CSVs, broken cost basis, and accounting tools that were never built for this asset. Bitment fixes that. Bitment is the Bitcoin native accounting platform built for CPAs, bookkeepers, advisors, miners, and serious Bitcoin investors. You get clean Bitcoin bank statements, reliable cost basis tracking, full reporting, and fiat integration through Plaid. No crypto talk, no workarounds, just proper accounting for the hardest money on earth. Create a free account or book a demo at bitment.co today.
Yeah, I would say that's amazing. I really appreciate you sharing that, because like, one, I think that's very, encouraging for people that may be intimidated and accepting Bitcoin. I mean, they're treasuring Bitcoin. It's like the tool set is getting very robust, but also encouraging and exciting too, that there's still plenty of opportunities to build.
Yeah, I was going to have you actually zoom in on the privacy component. I know, like, obviously Bitcoiners are, very particular bunch, right? And you're handling a lot of, sensitive information. I mean, that's just the nature of tax and accounting in general, but then even more so potentially on how do we even actually get some of this data from the client, right? Maybe we're having to ping their XPub. And then the other piece is, like, when you're paying out Bitcoin, if you don't do it right, are you exposing your balance to, a counterparty if you're just doing everything on chain? So maybe talk through just how you all approach privacy within the firm in general, and then how you're seeing some of these tools that are built out to actually just generally make Bitcoin more private than it inherently is.
Yeah. yeah, so always trade-offs there. I think for us, the privacy broadly comes from, if, one of the other sides of like using custodial services is that, the custodian is the one actually making the payments. And so like it's not going to a multi-sig or a single sig where we're holding the keys. And, if we wanted to pay all our employees out of our Bitcoin single sig wallet, like you could kind of see how much we were holding in there, right? It's not a great solution. But I think Lightning itself is a great option there, right? Where, payments on Lightning are more private. And then I know just on the more technical side, PayJoin has been one of those things that has been developed relatively recently that has a lot of potential there, where it still needs to gain adoption, traction, and actually get people to use it. But there are more ways that Bitcoin can be private. I think it's honestly one of those things where it is more of a, do people actually want it and do they care, versus are the tools available and out there. There are probably there's probably tools out there that are underutilized because there isn't actually as much of a focus on there. We have a select view, and like we see kind of more, maybe some of the more hardcore people that care about the privacy, but it's probably not up there as much for even most of our client base, right? So like we've made that a point of emphasis for our clients, for our operations. So like we'll use Proton Mail for our mail service. We have encrypted storage for receiving documents for clients. We do that because we care about, safeguarding and making sure that we don't leak our customers' information. But I think the reality is if we change from that, 95% of our clients probably don't care, right? And so it is very much the minority that we are trying to make sure that we satisfy, but then also like dragging some people along there, right? Where it's like, actually, there are really good reasons to care about this. This is not just privacy for the sake of like keeping all your information, secret so you can do tax fraud. It is, hey, you don't need to expose your data to people if they don't need it, right? And so some of that's education, but I think there are probably more. I don't think tools are the issue at this point. I think it is, the average Bitcoiner's willingness or sense of urgency to use them, I would say.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought that up, Joe, because that's something I really am curious in getting your input on, because something, Jordan and I want to do with this is helping normies or traditional financial service providers really kind of understand the language of Bitcoin and working with Bitcoiners. And, Bitcoiners are a unique bunch. And I think, the encryption, Proton are great examples of kind of going above and beyond to, service Bitcoiners or, provide what they want to see. So over the course of running your business, how have you been intentional about kind of serving the psyche and ethos of Bitcoiners?
Yeah. I mean, another example there is like, we will use like Maple AI for like our AI stuff of like, we want to stay on top of the most recent like progressions. We want to use technology to make our firm, more efficient, keep our prices down, like be able to do all that, but do it in a privacy preserving way. So I think it really has been like staying up to date on the most recent trends, what's available out there. And there are people on our team that know this stuff a lot better than I do. We kind of can lean on as far as, hey, what's going on? And so it really has been what are the tools out there and what are the trade-offs that we're making? We try not to do things just for the sake of like, hey, this is the most private way to do it. This is going to give us the most like brownie points for, the most hardcore privacy people. We try to make it actually like a tangible trade-off where it's like, all right, we use Proton Mail. There are some things that don't work as well with Proton Mail, but overall we feel better about using that than running it through like something like Google or Gmail, where we know all that information is going to get exposed, maybe not broadly, but to Google at least, right? And every one of those decisions is hard, though. There's not one thing where it's like we're always doing the most private thing. It is the privacy trade-off work, whatever other advantage it is out there. And I think as those tools get built out, though, ideally there's less and less trade-off to make to save that privacy. But it's always going to be a battle of like, what are you giving up? What are other firms able to do that we're not able to do because maybe it's not as open or not as integrated? So that's been a constant battle for us.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I wanted to potentially pivot a little bit because, part of this whole show is about educating, like what I just said about just what Bitcoin is. One of the things that struck me when I got into my Bitcoin podcast journey was I heard a gentleman on the What Bitcoin Did podcast. I'm going to blank on his name. Maybe I'll think of it. But he spoke about Bitcoin, the network. And, obviously there's Bitcoin, the asset. That's what people generally mean when they talk about Bitcoin. But then there's Bitcoin, the network. And Joe, I think you just have such a unique, position, being that you are the accounting guy in Bitcoin. Talk to us about what Bitcoin, the network is. How is it a ledger, and how do we actually all keep the ledger and make sure that there's no double spend, no funny business or anything like that?
Yeah, this is one of those things where I think because of the nature of Bitcoin, I would have expected more accountants to get it earlier, which is a little bit disappointing. But yeah, I don't know this was one of the initial draws to it, but it always made sense to me, right? I'm like, when we talk about the network, we're talking about essentially all the transactions historically on Bitcoin are all viewable on a ledger, all transparent, right? And you can go, I remember when I first, loaded up, ran my own node and seeing the blocks fill, right? And having the full data to go back to. I could be wrong about this, but I don't know that it really exists in any way with anything else out there. And so having a historical ledger there where you're able to see all those transactions, for 16 years now, is kind of an amazing thing just on itself. And that obviously a little bit of a tangent, but that led a lot of people in the kind of the earlier years, and probably even still today, of oh, this is awesome. What else can we do with this blockchain? I want to put everything on the blockchain, right? It was all right, maybe that wasn't really the right solution, but for money, right? Where it's I want to have a clear, transparent ledger of all the transactions that's happened, throughout the globe, or at least right now, whoever's using Bitcoin, is kind of an amazing thing from an accounting standpoint. And so yeah, from an accountant where it's hey, we're used to working with ledgers. We have double entry bookkeeping. Having, an open, transparent public ledger was always one of those, initial fascinating things that I would think your average accountant should be at least that's interesting, right? But we haven't had a ton of adoption necessarily in the accounting world compared to at least the broader space. But maybe we're catching up.
Hey, that's what we're trying to do here, right? Why we're trying to bring some more normal CPAs into the fold. Yeah, I feel like it's so interesting that how the nodes work. The analogy that I heard early on was, it's like a group of people, call it 10 people, who have all memorized the New Testament of the Bible, right? And so if one person says that John 3:16 says something that it doesn't, right? The other 9 folks who have memorized it, they can all, as a group, say, no, we all say unanimously, that's not true. And that's what the nodes are able to do, right? Since we're all running the same code, we've all got the same transaction history, we can validate amongst ourselves what's true on the network and what's not true, which is very interesting, because generally all that stuff's hidden, right? Maybe there's a group of nodes for JP Morgan Chase that has all their transaction history, but of course none of us can see that. And so, yeah, it's definitely that was always a big part of my Bitcoin journey as an accountant myself, I guess. So,
yeah. And I think the other big difference there is, Bitcoin is not tangible, right? But it is like actually sending data back and forth that has, something to it, right? Whereas like literally on the JP Morgan spreadsheet, it's just numbers from one sheet to another. And it's like, oh, I owe you this, now you owe me that. And these numbers go back and forth, right? Whereas like Bitcoin, whoever is it currently is at, whoever has those keys has that Bitcoin, right? And if it doesn't move, that you don't have a transfer of that Bitcoin. So that it is that kind of that digital but real asset side that is, I think, really hard to wrap your mind around at first, of like, hey, these are just made up numbers. And it's like, I mean, kind of, but also like there is something behind it, and it does require real energy to move the Bitcoin. And yeah, it is one of those things that, I don't think I even like touched the surface on for the first 5 years of kind of like thinking about Bitcoin. It took me a little while at least.
Well, I'm happy you brought that up, Joe, because that's one of the points I harp on. So we're all responsible for building a Bitcoinized financial system within the values, principles, and ethos of Bitcoin. And I think that only happens, with the asset settling and trading in kind. And that's, extremely important and obviously unique to Bitcoin, just being a digital bare asset. So I love that aspect about Bitcoin. I think it's really kind of underrated, especially when we're talking about how centralized ledgers work.
This episode is brought to you by Satoshi Pacioli, a full-service accounting and tax firm built for the Bitcoin economy. If you run a Bitcoin business, mine Bitcoin, or invest in it, you need advisors who actually understand how this industry works. Satoshi Pacioli handles bookkeeping, financial reporting, tax compliance, and strategic planning for Bitcoin-focused companies and individuals. They speak the language of Bitcoiners and help you stay compliant while building for the long term. To learn more or book a consultation, visit satoshipacioli.com. So, I'd love to just bring up how the firm is changing. Of course, for those who don't know, Joe and I are actually merging our firms together here by the end of this year. But specifically, like, your team has grown a lot over the last, obviously, 3 or 4 years. I'd love for you to touch on, the client advisory services that you guys are adding on, as well as touch on the PBM side, because I think it's really unique what you're trying to build. Essentially trying to help bring the Bitcoin businesses into the future and adding some pretty unique consulting services on top of the underlying accounting stack.
Yeah. There's probably a lot there. I could dive into kind of each of it. I mean, as far as the team growth, yeah, like we're looking at, beginning of next year as a merged firm, about 11 people to start. You said growth over the last 3 or 4 years. It really has been the last 2 years. It was just me for the first 2 years. And then essentially added 2 people in year 3. And now as we're going, year 4 into year 5, we'll be at 11. So yeah, pretty significant growth in a relatively short period of time after like a kind of a slow start there, right? Where it's the first couple of years, it's very like, hey, what's going on? What's the industry? What's our actual unique fit here? So that's been interesting. And yeah, kind of like you touched on, we're trying to see what is out there as far as needs in the industry and what are kind of some of the unique values that we can bring. And so we started with, the accounting, the monthly close, the financial reporting stuff. We have essentially like 3-4 people per 3 or 4 person team doing that. We have, a whole full tax function. What are we up to there on the tax side now? If we do FTEs?
Yeah, I think it's 5 or 6 of us, depending on what bucket you fall in.
Figure out how much you want to allocate to each person. So So yeah, that's kind of always been like a 50-50 thing for us though, of like between tax and then the monthly accounting. Kind of been 50-50 as far as like workload, revenue coming in, kind of a split there, and that they do work very nicely together of like, hey, you need tax support, you need monthly accounting, you need, and then also like leaning into like fractional CFO, client advisory services. We're going to have a full-time person devoted to fractional CFO work. And in the new year, we already have, I think probably a backlog of clients that need that right now. So really being able to ramp that up in 2026, and really just being able to focus on, I think uniquely that fractional CFO side, it is getting someone with many years of experience doing fractional CFO work, but also with a deep understanding of Bitcoin is going to be very hard to find. There's a few of them out there, but like being able to bring one on full time onto the team now that we have kind of the workload and need for it has been like, I think will be a huge value add across our whole client base, right? And that there is the, hey, a dedicated fractional CFO, and then there is the, hey, I just need these one-off questions here and there, and like being able to have that on the team will be great. And then you reference the kind of the PBM stuff, what I would broadly call kind of like organizational development, a little bit outside the main accounting focus of the organization, outside accounting and tax, or even finance, where it gets into how do you as a Bitcoiner want to think about running your business, growing your business? That has been one of those things where I came from an organization that had a pretty strong culture as far as like organization, development, leadership, and how organizations should run. And one of the guys that worked there and that I learned a bunch of stuff from was looking for new opportunities, really wanted to get into Bitcoin. And so it was one of those just, I wouldn't have done it if the time and place hadn't kind of worked out nicely for both of us. And so he's been helping us internally for the last few months, to kind of build out our processes, and the timing's worked great as far as we've grown as a team to help us think more strategically about things. A whole wide range of things that would probably be better to dive into with him versus me trying to explain it all, but really just fundamentally trying to get organizations to be strategic and with that Bitcoin mindset as far as growth and long-term thinking. And we have him working with one external client as kind of a test case for us right now, and then really looking to roll that out broader in the new year again to what other Bitcoin businesses out there are growing, doing really well. Maybe they have a first-time founder. They want to get things organized as far as like, hey, how do I want to run this business? How do I get everyone on the same page? I think there's a huge need for that. And so we'll be rolling out that more broadly, probably towards January this year, and seeing, what companies kind of want to dive into it.
Well, I'm so happy we got on this topic because that was something I was really interested in chatting with you about, Joe. Is I think there's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem when it comes to growing Bitcoin businesses. You spent time in traditional finance. You obviously built a business in Bitcoin. So two-parter here. It's like, when you've come to evaluating talent, are you kind of prioritizing, knowledge in Bitcoin? Are you kind of, prioritizing, a knowledge in, your core field and like trying to teach or train staff on one or the other? And then the second, which kind of you're related to what you were just talking about, being in Bitcoin, servicing Bitcoiners, having Bitcoin as a core function and ethos of your business. How is that influence your thoughts on your business model? How does it vary from traditional CPA or advisory firms? Why don't you tackle those two things for us?
Yeah. So I guess on the first side, so one of the tools we have kind of in our organizational framework is like when we look at talent, we have them on like a matrix of like virtues and then talents. So it is like, how technically competent are you? How good are you at doing the thing that you're going to do? And like, what are your virtues, right? And you decide how much like Bitcoin wants to like work into those virtues. But really it is like, we're primarily focused on like, who are the high value people that if I need to teach them something, I can teach them, but they're going to be the right people for the organization long term over the person that may be the most technically competent. And I think I would have probably apply that to Bitcoin or accounting, right? So I can teach someone more about accounting, or I could teach them more about tax. I can't teach them to be a better person, right? That we're probably a little bit past that phase. So that's kind of how we think about it as far as like priorities there. And I think either way, like we've had people that are newer to Bitcoin that are still learning, but really want to grow, right? And then we have people that have been in Bitcoin for a while. That's maybe more closer to me, where it's like, hey, I just want to work into Bitcoin. How do I figure out how to contribute there, right? And so Bitcoin is inherently a piece of that, I think, as we look at the people that we're bringing on. But it is not like a one size fits all. It is very much, I think, virtues first, and then out of that, like, what's the right fit for the organization? So I think that was the first part of your question. What was the second part?
Just how Bitcoin has changed or influenced your thoughts on your business model.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of one of the things that we try to build into this, what we're calling like a PBM product, which is essentially, like an organizational framework of like, how do you think about your business? And one of the key aspects there that we kind of align with is taking a long-term view of how you grow your business. And I think that nicely fits in with kind of the Bitcoin ethos of low time preference, right? And it is, how do I build this business to be sustainable and add value to clients in the long term? We know there's a bunch of things that you can do in the short term to make more money, but is that really in the interest of your clients? And I think that aligns nicely with, hey, I'm holding Bitcoin. I know it's going to be volatile. But I think long term, it is better for humanity. It's a better asset. I want to hold some portion of my wealth in it, right? And so I think those, as we looked at this product and as we're trying to build it out, of like who is going to like gravitate to it and would actually buy in and get value into some of these concepts, it's going to be the Bitcoiner that is already kind of familiar with it and comfortable with it from a very like kind of base level.
Oh, that's awesome. And follow-up question: how did you justify bringing Jordan on, even though he scored low on that virtue scale?
Yes, it was. I mean, he was obviously very high in other areas, but that is one of the things actually. I'm like, we have like we call it like a matrix, right? And like you actually, the person that's really high in the talent section, if they're not, like, they're actually the worst one to have if they're low on the virtue, because like they're the ones that can actually do the worst damage to your organization. So as much as I would like to say that Jordan is like very, very low on that, it probably doesn't work out.
No, it's been fun. Honestly, I like Joe and I met because I was trying to, talk to him about, hey, maybe this software we're developing would be helpful for the firm. And he's like, yeah, no, that sounds interesting, but what if we just merge firms together too? And I was like, let's do that too. That sounds fun. So
No, it was very much one of those things where we knew we potentially were growing, and it was like, hey, we got all this inbound demand. It was me and Seth. It was like, all right, we're pulling this off, but it's like, we need more people. We need more expertise. And Jordan had been doing this for a while already. And he was building out this software. So it was like, hey, if we need more people, like, there's not gonna be anybody better than Jordan. So like, how do we pull this off that's mutually beneficial for everybody? And so we talked for a little while, and we were eventually able to make it happen.
Yeah, no, it's all fun stuff. Well, I think that I don't have any other questions. I don't know why. Is anything else on your mind you want to make sure we cover?
Yeah, I'm starting to think we should just make this a recurring question for all of our guests. But I think it's so funny, Joe, that it's almost like innate within Bitcoiners. Like, they have this skepticism of professional services. They're like, oh, I just buy Bitcoin, I'm fine. How have you encountered that? How have you kind of countered it, or educated your client base, where it's like, yes, Bitcoin's awesome, but my services are still valuable?
Yeah. we probably don't get that as much as you do. Cause like, I mean, we will get the people that will say, oh, why would I pay taxes on my Bitcoin? The government doesn't know about it. I'm not going to pay taxes when I send my Bitcoin or whatever it is. And I'm like, that's fine. You go ahead and do that. We're just not going to be your accountant. But generally, if people are coming to us, they realize there's a need for it, right? And they're trying to do it correctly. And so like those people that are coming to us, like we get less of that in that, assuming that they do want to compliantly file their taxes, like they're going to have a need and like a support for that. So probably less so than your side where they are saying like, hey, I'm just going to hold everything in Bitcoin. I don't need any help, where it's like, there's a little bit more nuance to that. Right. But yeah, I think we'll get more of that, honestly, as people just hold the ETF, right? And they're like, oh, I just have the ETF. It's just like anything else. And then it's like, all right, if you just want to hold the ETF, that's fine. Again, we're probably not the right fit for you. So we'll probably see that evolve in the years to come.
Must be nice. You guys have a spoiled riches over at Satoshi Pacioli. I should have been an accountant.
I don't know about that. Every accountant I've ever worked with, I feel like in the first couple of years, they're like, oh, what do you want to do next? How do you want to evolve? And they're like, oh, I want to go work in finance. I'm like, I know you want to go work in finance, but someone's got to do the accounting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't be too jealous.
No, definitely not. Well, this is great. Joe, thank you so much for just being so gracious and generous with your time, and for being our first guest on the Bitcoin for Financial Services podcast. We'll be excited to bring you back out to Denver, where Wyatt's at. We're out in the mountains, mountain men out there. Wyatt's always giving me stuff, crap about living in the Midwest. So Joe's trying to get me to move to Nashville. Wyatt's trying to get me to move out west, and my in-laws want me to move to Florida. So I got to figure out where to go next, I guess. But all that said, really appreciate it, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Joe. I hope you wear the first guest with a badge of honor. Quick clarification, though, because that was slanderous. I'm a Midwest boy at heart. I'm from the Midwest. Kentucky is not the Midwest. That's the South.
Well, okay. Well, Louisville is right on the line, generally.
Is Tennessee in the Midwest?
Yeah, that's the South, too.
Okay.
That's what we said right when we were getting on the call. I was like, Joe, did you get snow today? He's like, no, I'm in the South. I'm like, all right, fair enough. So, well, this is great. Yeah, we'll probably have to bring you back on, Joe, maybe post tax season. Yes. And get the rundown on how everything went. So, where can people find the content that Pacioli's putting out? Follow you if they wanted to reach out for services.
Yeah, probably it should be pretty easy to find. Satoshi Pacioli, we're really the only one out there. It's a little hard to spell, but Satoshi Pacioli accounting. You'll find us, our website, Twitter, Nostr. We have Substack as well. So if you want more of this content, I would go to the Substack probably first. That's where we're really trying to build out and get some more educational resources, whether they're for our clients or more broadly. Some really valuable information that we think is missing there that it's hard to fit into like kind of a short tweet. So that's where I would point people to the most.
Perfect. All righty. Well, thank you so much, Joe. We will talk to you next time.
Great. Thanks.
We appreciate you joining us. If you want to help build the future of Bitcoin and financial services, hit subscribe, leave a review, sign up for our newsletter, and most importantly, share this with someone in your network who's integrating Bitcoin into their practice. The more professionals we reach, the stronger the ecosystem becomes, and our clients are better served. Stay sharp, stay sovereign, and keep leading from the front.